and welcome to the Cybersecurity Mastermind series organized by Cyber Houston. We are live and excited to have you join us today. Today is the first of many webinars we will be hosting to highlight our cybersecurity rock stars and masterminds and bring you valuable information, especially during this unprecedented time as we adjust to our new work environments. I am Umesh, Verma, CEO of Blue Lance and founder of Cyber Houston. Today, we have a very relevant topic that will address the issues several companies are facing during the COVID pandemic, which is securing cybersecurity for remote workers. We are truly grateful to have Jon Villanti as our guest today to speak to this issue and suggest tips and ways we can handle these challenges. Jon is Vice President and Information Security Officer for Allegiance Bank and a founding member of the Greater Houston Cybersecurity Council. Before I turn it over to Jon, we would like to thank our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for making the Cybersecurity Mastermind series possible. Also, at the end of this presentation, we will have time for a live Q&A session with Jon to answer as many of you get to. If you have a question that pops up anytime during the session, please enter it in the Q&A window on your page, and we will try and get to your question. Now, along the way, you will also have a few polls in order to make the session interactive and fun. So I encourage you to participate, and let's have a good time and learn a lot. Now, before I turn it over to Jon on a personal basis, Jon is a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserves. He's an ex-F pilot. He is a SANS instructor. Jon is a Houstonian, and he and his wife are active in dog rescue and fostering. With that, I'd like to welcome Jon to start his presentation. Welcome, Jon.
And yeah, we are avid dog lovers, and I know they're about to come home from a walk with my wife. So if you see a little chat, you'll know they're home from their walk. So welcome. This is really exciting. It's our first ever Cyber Houston live webcast. And this session is really all about you, helping you to secure your remote users, your cloud-based applications, and the infrastructure that you've created to support your new remote workforce. And we do have people behind the scenes helping out with the webcast, facilitating Q&A and the polls. This is our first time doing it, so there might be a few glitches here and there. I know that the internet is pretty busy. There might be some lag that you experience, but we're going to get through this. So if you do have questions along the way, post them into the Q&A section. We're covering a pretty small slice of topics today. So if you have a question outside of the topical area, don't be afraid to ask it. Put it in there. We'll take a look at it, and we can really help each other out as a community event to become better at securing our infrastructure. Also, I know there's a lot of really smart people on the call. I've already been in chat with a few people on the webcast. So if you're doing something that's working out really well, either at your company or for some clients of yours, let us know what your tips and tricks are. Let us know any suggestions, things that you're doing that's working for you. We want to be able to help each other out along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation up. A lot of the presentations I do are, I put it in the terms of a cyber survival guide. I like to focus on small and medium-sized businesses. I know it's kind of an underserved section of the market. Here's my standard disclaimer. I just want to remind you that anything I say is mine and mine alone. It doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of the bank or their position. So this is a pretty interesting map. It shows some statewide stay-at-home orders, and most all of the states are in that orangish type color. And what that really meant is, that's kind of how we got to where we are today. And where we are today is approximately 66% of all employees are working remotely. Now, pre-COVID-19, About 7% of the workforce work remotely. That's almost a 10x increase in people at home. And as information practitioners, whether it's operational IT or IT security, we were all scrambling to create solutions that supported a remote workforce. We all had to do different things to achieve the same basic operational capabilities. Some of us had to build new infrastructure in the cloud. We might have expanded existing infrastructure in the cloud. We might have built new on-prem. We could have expanded on-prem. Regardless of on-prem or in the cloud, we all made changes. We all changed configurations to allow remote access, and things were changing really fast. Actually, yesterday I was talking to a friend, and she described it as being in a position of constantly pivoting. I think it really could be described as the epitome of fail fast and fail forwards. And as we created these new capabilities, we broke some glass. The focus was really on getting it done. And now that the dust has settled, we need to make sure we didn't create holes or gaps which attackers can take advantage of. Hackers are scanning the internet every single day looking for weaknesses with remote access solutions, think Pulse VPNs. They're looking for exploitable home routers, and they're phishing your users with greater veracity than ever. And I really think security's always been hard. It's now just gotten harder. We're faced with a multi-dimensional challenge to secure home networks, secure the users, secure remote access solutions, and cloud-based applications. And one thing I don't see a lot of companies doing is putting on their offensive hat, putting themselves into an attacker mindset. We just made all these changes. We have all these people working from home. So I think that people should think like an attacker and understand how they might try to exploit these vulnerabilities or a misconfiguration or the employees themselves. So use some offensive tools, scan and probe your own environment, phish your users. You need to know what the adversary is able to see. And the exact tools and techniques are outside the scope of this webcast, but let us know in the chat window if you think this is something you'd like to see us cover in the future. And I'm just gonna stop here real quick and jump into Q&A, see if we have any questions. And you'll see on the right-hand side underneath the chat window are some questions. And I do see one. Have you seen any increases in COVID-19 themed phishing emails? Well, the answer absolutely is yes. Our filters do a great job from stopping these spam emails and these phishing emails, but some get through. And the interesting thing is some of the themes that we're seeing. You've got the standard impersonation of the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, but attackers are actually spoofing legitimate vendors like Microsoft, Zoom, and lately, I heard the other day that over 700 new domains have been created to imposter Netflix. So they're trying to phish people.
Hello, and welcome to the Cybersecurity Mastermind series organized by Cyber Houston. We are live and excited to have you join us today. Today is the first of many webinars we will be hosting to highlight our cybersecurity rock stars and masterminds and bring you valuable information, especially during this unprecedented time as we adjust to our new work environments. I am Umesh Verma, CEO of Lance and founder of Cyber Houston. Today, we have a very relevant topic that will address the issues several companies are facing during the COVID-19, which is securing cybersecurity for remote workers. We are truly grateful to have Jon Villanti as our guest today to speak to this issue and suggest tips and ways we can handle these challenges. Jon is Vice President and Information Security Officer for Allegiance Bank and a founding member of the Greater Houston Cybersecurity Council. Before I turn it over to Jon, we would like to thank our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for making the Cybersecurity Mastermind series possible. Also, at the end of this presentation, we will have time for a live Q&A session with Jon to answer as many of you get to. If you have a question that pops up anytime during the session, please enter it in the Q&A window on your page, and we will try and get to your question. Now, along the way, you will also have a few polls in order. Hello, and welcome to the Cybersecurity Mastermind series organized by Cyber Houston. We are live and excited to have you join us today. Today is the first of many webinars we will be hosting to highlight our cybersecurity rock stars and masterminds and bring you valuable information, especially during this unprecedented time as we adjust to our new work environments. I am Umesh, Verma, CEO of Lance and founder of Cyber Houston. Today, we have a very relevant topic that will address the issues several companies are facing during the COVID pandemic, which is securing cybersecurity for remote workers. We are truly grateful to have Jon Villanti as our guest today to speak to this issue and suggest tips and ways we can handle these challenges. Jon is Vice President and Information Security Officer for Allegiance Bank and a founding member of the Greater Houston Cybersecurity Council. Before I turn it over to Jon, we would like to thank our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for making the Cybersecurity Mastermind series possible. Also, at the end of this presentation, we will have time for a live Q&A session with Jon to answer as many of you get to. If you have a question that pops up anytime during the session, please enter it in the Q&A window on your page, and we will try and get to your question. Now, along the way, you will also have a few polls in order to make the session interactive and fun. So I encourage you to participate, and let's have a good time and learn a lot. Now, before I turn it over to Jon on a personal basis, Jon is a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserves. He's an ex-F pilot. He is a SANS instructor. Jon is a Houstonian, and he and his wife are active in dog rescue and fostering. With that, I'd like to welcome Jon to start his presentation. Welcome, Jon.
And yeah, we are avid dog lovers, and I know they're about to come home from a walk with my wife. So if you see a little chat, you'll know they're home from their walk. So welcome. This is really exciting. It's our first ever Cyber Houston live webcast. And this session is really all about you, helping you to secure your remote users, your cloud-based applications, and the infrastructure that you've created to support your new remote workforce. And we do have people behind the scenes helping out with the webcast, facilitating Q&A and the polls. This is our first time doing it, so there might be a few glitches here and there. I know that the internet is pretty busy. There might be some lag that you experience, but we're going to get through this. So if you do have questions along the way, post them into the Q&A section. We're covering a pretty small slice of topics today. So if you have a question outside of a topical area, don't be afraid to ask it. Put it in there. We'll take a look at it, and we can really help each other out as a community event to become better at securing our infrastructure. Also, I know there's a lot of really smart people on the call. I've already been in chat with a few people on the webcast. So if you're doing something that's working out really well, either at your company or for some clients of yours, let us know what your tips and tricks are. Let us know any suggestions, things that you're doing that's working for you. We want to be able to help each other out along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation up. A lot of the presentations I do are, I put it in the terms of a cyber survival guide. I like to focus on small and medium-sized businesses. I know it's kind of an underserved section of the market. Here's my standard disclaimer. I just want to remind you that anything I say is mine and mine alone. It doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of the bank or their position. So this is a pretty interesting map. It shows some statewide stay-at-home orders, and most all of the states are in that orangish type color. And what that really meant is, that's kind of how we got to where we are today. And where we are today is approximately 66% of all employees are working remotely. Now, pre-COVID-19, about 7% of the workforce worked remotely. That's almost a 10x increase in people at home. And as information practitioners, whether it's operational IT or IT security, we were all scrambling to create solutions that supported a remote workforce. We all had to do different things to achieve the same basic operational capabilities. Some of us had to build new infrastructure in the cloud. We might have expanded existing infrastructure in the cloud. We might have built new on-prem. We could have expanded on-prem. Regardless of on-prem or in the cloud, we all made changes. We all changed configurations to allow remote access, and things were changing really fast. Actually, yesterday I was talking to a friend, and she described it as being in a position of constantly pivoting. I think it really could be described as the epitome of fail fast and fail forwards. And as we created these new capabilities, we broke some glass. The focus was really on getting it done. And now that the dust has settled, we need to make sure we didn't create holes or gaps which attackers can take advantage of. Hackers are scanning the internet every single day looking for weaknesses with remote access solutions, think Pulse VPNs. They're looking for exploitable home routers, and they're phishing your users with greater veracity than ever. And I really think security's always been hard. It's now just gotten harder. We're faced with a multi-dimensional challenge to secure home networks, secure the users, secure remote access solutions, and cloud-based applications. And one thing I don't see a lot of companies doing is putting on their offensive hat, putting themselves into an attacker mindset. We just made all these changes. We have all these people working from home. So I think that people should think like an attacker and understand how they might try to exploit these vulnerabilities or a misconfiguration or the employees themselves. So use some offensive tools, scan and probe your own environment, phish your users. You need to know what the adversary is able to see. And the exact tools and techniques are outside the scope of this webcast, but let us know in the chat window if you think this is something you'd like to see us cover in the future. And I'm just gonna stop here real quick and jump into Q&A, see if we have any questions. And you'll see on the right-hand side underneath the chat window are some questions. And I do see one. Have you seen any increases in COVID-19 themed phishing emails? Well, the answer absolutely is yes. Our filters do a great job from stopping these spam emails and these phishing emails, but some get through. And the interesting thing is some of the themes that we're seeing. You've got the standard impersonation of the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, but attackers are actually spoofing legitimate vendors like Microsoft, Zoom, and lately, I heard the other day that over 700 new domains have been created to imposter Netflix. So they're trying to phish people by chasing the money. They're phishing people with Netflix-themed emails and with Disney Plus themed emails as well. And I was reading in an article that Google blocks 240 million spams a day related to COVID-19, and they're actually blocking another 18 million emails, which are scams or phishing, malware, malicious type things. So that's pretty interesting. I'm just making sure the screen catches up. I'm changing my slides. Here we are. Good. So here's the challenge. Not too hard, right? Secure all the things. We need to do everything we've been doing all along, but we need to do a little bit more, and we need to do it better. A lot of our protections came from traditional inside the network or at the perimeter. So we've relied on network access control, 802.1x, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, proxies, stateful firewall inspection, packet filtering routers, load balancing, and more. but those devices aren't protecting the endpoints anymore because the endpoints are at home. So fundamentally, what do we do about this? My applications, these are really the elements at risk. And we're going to address these areas by looking at cloud applications, remote access solutions, and securing the user inside of their own home. So the use of video conferencing and online calls has skyrocketed. We're all doing it. We're doing issues with some of the providers. This really reinforces the need to educate our users on how to use these technologies better. And if you RSVP to this session, you're going to be receiving a follow-up email with a document containing many references to accompany this content. One of those references is going to link to IAN's research. And IAN's published a Word document that will help step you through secure setup of various collaboration tools. They have all the major tools in that security checklist. And before COVID-19 hit us, many had adopted cloud-based email and various office productivity solutions, Office 365, Google's G Suite, and host-based applications. These are great, right? They give us anywhere, anytime, any device access to email and more. The problem is most people don't put multi-factor authentication on top of it. And this really puts you at significant risk. Internet. So if you've already pivoted into these SaaS apps and various outsourced emails and you're not using MFA, that has to be #1 on your to-do list to secure cloud-based applications. Personally, I don't believe using email is a good way to achieve multi-factor authentication. As an example, let's say you've configured Log Me In to use email as MFA. If an attacker already knows your Office 365 credentials, they're inside of your email and they have the ability to see that one-time passcode. So, and I see business email compromised all the time, and it's typically related to Office 365 or Outlook on the web, which form. Now, as we use multi-factor authentication and we try and pay really good attention to how we're protecting access to these cloud and review of those logs. So I really recommend you get those logs into your SIM. If you don't have a SIM, you should be able to export logs into an Excel file with some sorting and filtering. You can start to look at unexpected IP addresses on a per user basis. And something that's unexpected is going to stick out like a sore thumb. And if you want to thread that needle a little bit further, you can pump the IP address into some whois lookups that connection is coming from. You certainly will get a little bit more excited and nervous if it's coming from a hostile nation rather than from the United States. You can also look at user agent strings to identify people using non-corporate assets to access those cloud-based applications. So I'd like to stop here and have our first poll of the day. So Leslie, if you can open up the polls. I'm interested in knowing what collaboration tools you're using when you're hosting meetings. And if you don't host meetings and you simply participate in them, let us know which one you use the most often. So you should see a voting button underneath the chat window. And Leslie, let's go ahead and close out the poll. And everyone should be able to click on the show results button. Interesting. So we've got more GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar than WebEx, and nobody's using Zoom. So potentially the problems with Zoom have scared people away and no one's using it. I'm going to go ahead and jump in the Q&A, see if there's anything waiting for us. And I do see one question being asked. Zoom has been in the news a lot lately. What happened? Are they really sending data to China? Yeah, they have been in the news and they do have some problems. There's a number of zero-day announcements related to both their Windows client and their Mac client. Actually, as of last Friday, there's 2 0 days being offered by bug brokers, and one of them is reportedly selling for $500,000. Their use of encryption has also come into question. They're using a decent algorithm. They're using AES. They're using 128-bit key strength, which is good enough, but the mode they've used is insufficient. They're using something called electronic codebook, and that is never recommended. They really should be using cipher block chaining, and I don't understand why they're not. Cipher block chaining was invented 43 years ago, so I don't think this would have caught the Zoom developers by surprise. And some of you might have heard that some Zoom traffic is being routed through China. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. The traffic is going through China. It has been. And a majority of Zoom users are here in North America, so it doesn't make sense that traffic would go through China on the surface. But when we look at how we've had to scale up by about 10x from 7% remote workforce to almost 70% workforce, Zoom has had to do it by 20x. They went from 10 million to 200 million users. That's a huge increase. And their infrastructure, quite frankly, couldn't keep up. So they have a content delivery network that's tuned to send traffic between Zoom servers with the lowest latency and the best performance. And in some instances, the best performance was to go through China. I expect to see a lot of that die down as they continue to scale up their infrastructure. So it's that's a really good question, but I wouldn't get too nervous about the Chinese thing. I don't think it's malicious. I don't think anyone's trying to steal. Moving back to the next screen. I think we are having a little bit of latency ourselves here. Good. I can see the screen now. So we talked a little bit about creating that capability for a remote workforce. So let's talk a little bit more about what was being done. And I think if you look at this slide, 3 broad categories of remote access. VPN is the most traditional mode. It allows you, those endpoints are still receiving patches from your WSUS or SCCM servers. You're still getting updated group policy. And aside from some lag in performance, it's a lot like being in the office. I would say you must be using MFA on your VPN solution to prevent unauthorized access. And you should be sending your VPN logs into a SIM, or at the least reviewing VPN access reports. In general, I favor log collection, enrichment, correlation, and real-time alerting over periodic report reviews, but you can only do what you can do based on the data and the tools that you have. And when working with VPN servers, this is another point in time where we have to get offensive. It's critical to use offensive tools to assess the security of these devices. The bad guys are doing it already for you. You need to also understand what they can see. And one of the easiest ways, if you've never done this before, or you don't know where to start, spin up a Kali VM inside of AWS, or there's a hosting firm called Vultr that has some great Kali Linux VMs, and you can conduct various tests against those IP addresses behind or in front of the VPN servers. And you can understand what it really looks like. Do you have weaknesses? Do you have exposures? You can go ahead and remediate them. Ultimately, it ends up in a race condition. You are racing to get ahead of the adversary to find those weaknesses. If you win, you fix. If you lose, you have a really bad day. Now, remote desktop protocol. I think most people are familiar with it. It's very commonly used in the inside of networks so admins can work on servers from the convenience of their own office. Well, some people have decided to open up RDP to the internet, and they're using various port forwarding rules so that every employee has a unique RDP session to a desktop computer that sits in their office. So on the surface, this is a great operational thinking. This is a great way to provide remote access, to get work done. But from a security perspective, it's absolutely horrible. It is really a hack waiting to happen. It is not safe. It is not secure. Nobody should be doing it. If you are doing it, and don't worry if you are, no one told you you shouldn't do it. So luckily you're on this webcast and now you're learning, hey, don't do this. You do have a few options. You can connect to RDP over VPN. That would be the preferred method. But maybe you don't have a VPN infrastructure set up, or you would be using it already. There still is hope. You can actually put a Microsoft server with the remote desktop gateway feature, the role rather, into your DMZ, and that will broker the connections between the remote side and your office. So this is really great. It establishes encrypted SSL tunnel between the end user's device and the gateway server. It'll authenticate the user into the environment. It'll pass traffic back and forth between the end user's device and the specified resource. If you are going to use a remote desktop gateway, remember, log all your traffic, get it into your SIM, and make sure multi-factor authentication is required when logging onto that remote desktop gateway. Now, in addition to VPN and RDP, there's a number of commercial solutions that allow you to remotely control the computers that you have at your office. You don't have to create any infrastructure, you don't have to scale anything up, and the user experience is identical to if the employee was sitting at their desk. There's a number of options available to you, so do your research and pick the one which best suits your needs. Make sure you're using MFA and you're logging access. I recommend that you only use company computers to access these solutions. I don't really think it's a great idea to be exposing company secrets onto employees' untrusted computers. And here we'll take a little bit of a pause for our second poll. And Leslie, I'd like you to open up poll number 2. I'm interested in knowing what type of remote access that you're using. And if you are using more than one, unfortunately, we can't select more than one option, so just select the one that's most prevalent. And we do have a good tip from the chat window, using SSL VPN layer 7 instead of layer 3. That gives you the ability to inspect more deeply into that payload layer instead of just filtering or dealing with IP addresses. And another good point about remote access via LogMeIn, et cetera, those endpoints do need to be managed, and the configuration of the account needs to be done in a very secure manner. So you could end up, what we don't want to do is fire and forget. You don't want to turn something on, let it run, and simply not manage it. Anything that you put into play needs to be continuously managed. This is not a fire and forget. We can close that poll. Let's take a look at the results. And today I am powered by Green Mountain Coffee Roasters Dark Magic. Okay, great. Lots and lots of people on VPN, some go to my PC. So hopefully, if you're on that VPN path, you're using multi-factor authentication, you're tied into against Active Directory and you've got good logs. So that's a really, really good set of results. I'm proud of everybody for having good, secure remote access. I'm gonna let me jump into the Q&A window real quick and see if we've got anything. You have to forgive me, I'm balancing quite a few screens here. Is LogMeIn secure? How does it work? LogMeIn is secure, just like Andy had said. It's really provided on or dependent on how you configure it. The use of multi-factor authentication is mandatory. Don't allow your users to use email. Force them to enter their Windows credentials when logging on to that computer. Have long, complex passwords. Make sure you're logging access into the solution. That really gives you a strong set of controls on the preventative side and on the detective side. As far as how does it work, well, there's two main pieces of software. There's a server side that you would install at the computer at the office, and then there's the client side, which goes on the remote endpoint. Each of those pieces of software authenticate over TLS to LogMeIn servers, and then once the proper passwords have been conveyed, LogMeIn will bridge those two separate TLS connections and they do not, according to their documentation and their promises, we have to take everything with a grain of salt, but they do not harvest or store that Windows password. Let me jump back to Q&A, see if there's anything else. Yep, there's another question. You mentioned multi-factor authentication. Should we use a password manager too? I know that we're kind of in this world that's moving towards passwordless, and while it might be a nice aspiration, we're not there. So we have to live with passwords. And I absolutely believe in password managers, provided the master password is long, complex, difficult to guess, easy to remember. It then houses all of your other passwords. So I think it really goes hand in hand with multi-factor authentication and creates a stronger preventative control into the environment. So here's, in one of my LinkedIn posts, I told you that I promised you would hear something that you've never heard before or something that was novel. And this slide really encapsulated it. So I don't know if you find yourselves in a position where you didn't have enough company laptops and people actually have gone home and they're using personal computers to connect into some form of remote access to the company. And that is insanity. And it's really hanging a flag outside the window saying, please come hack me. But there's a novel way to kind of bypass any malware on that endpoint. We don't boot into the operating system on the computer. Instead, we boot into a live USB stick. We're running an operating system off the USB stick in memory of the computer. And once we turn that computer off, it'll have full amnesia and not remember anything that happened during the session. So this is almost, it gives rise to a new category of BYOD. And I'm not going to say it's ideal, but it's better than using a home PC, which may already be infected with malware. And in the references that you're going to get afterwards, there is a link to an Ubuntu tutorial showing you how to create a live USB. And I'm not saying Ubuntu is the best operating system to use, but it's a very good tutorial, and it's a very common, popular flavor of Linux with wide support for hardware and drivers. So that's why I included that. If you have a different operating system that you prefer, those same techniques in the tutorials can be used with other operating systems. Just pick the one that makes the most sense for you. In my opinion, the hardest part is actually figuring out what key to press when your computer turns on that allows you to get into the boot menu. So every manufacturer seems to have a different key. But once you're booted and you have a trusted PC, you can connect into a remote desktop gateway, log me in, or other remote control software. And you still have, obviously, you're going to be using multi-factor authentication. It's just important to know the machine will have amnesia, so you want to be saving everything onto corporate resources. Nothing's going to be saved onto that local live USB. Here's a quick screenshot that shows you really how easy it is. This is Rufus in action. And you might have a USB creator tool other than Rufus. If you do, then use it. But if you've never done this before, use some of those reference links. Go grab and download Rufus. It's a standalone executable. You're going to download what's known as an ISO file. Go get the Ubuntu desktop ISO. It's important to get the desktop version. If you get the server version, you'll be stuck at a command line with no graphical user interface. All you do is run Rufus, point it at the ISO file for Ubuntu, click on the start button, and you're done. Like I said, the hardest part is figuring out what button to press when the PC powers on. Typically, it's like an F2, F10, F12, delete. You're going to have to do a little bit of research to figure out what your manufacturer supports. And here we're going to take a look at poll 3. I'm interested to know what you're using at home. We know that everyone's pretty much using VPN. Are you using that with a personal computer, a company laptop? Or some people have actually taken their workstations home from their office. So Leslie, if you could open up the polls. And while you're answering that poll, there was a question asked in the chat window about compliance purposes and monitoring successful logons, failed logons, etc., file access. So, it is obviously it's continued best practice to have your remote computers supported by a strong audit policy vis-a-vis the operating system. It is. You still want them to do this. It's a little bit harder though, because it's going to take a little more bandwidth to send that those event logs over the VPN connection to the backend SIM. I would also say that think about what's happening to that computer if you're sitting at the office. How many people on this call are actually sending endpoint data into their SIM? It's very rare. I have a past life as a consultant, and I worked with a lot of different businesses, and typically the data going into a SIM comes from their servers and their network infrastructure devices and any security solutions, like maybe an EDR tool, IDS, IPS, things of that nature. So while yes, you should be doing it, I would say very few companies are doing it properly, even while the computer's in the office, let alone while it's remote. So I think we can go ahead and close out these polls. Let's take a look at the results. Okay, so here we're pretty split. We can see that 38% of people are using a personally owned computer, 46% are using a company laptop, and 15% don't have a computer that they're using. So if you're using a personally owned computer, there's a few things to consider. One, take a look at your remote access method and understand if it could be supported by a live USB. And one of the things you can do with a live USB, obviously these computers have more than one USB port. Sometimes you can put a client-side VPN application on a second USB stick, and you can mount that inside of the live USB, and you can launch it. So you can still participate in a VPN, even if you're using a personally owned computer. Once again, it's not ideal, but we find ourselves in very challenging times. So we have to come up with creative solutions that are workable. And the beauty with that, 91% of people said they're on VPN, those logs are being generated at the company in the data center. So there's really good abilities to log that traffic, still get it into the SIM, enrich the data, correlate the data, and provide necessary alerts. Also talk about personal computers in a different, I didn't put this in the slides, but a number of vendors are giving away free stuff. So you look at CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike, if you're a customer of CrowdStrike, they're going to give you free licenses for their endpoint detection and response tool to give to your home users. And so now as an information security team, you're going to have visibility into those personally owned computers. Now, I would recommend you set up a separate group for them so that you can send activities and detections between corporate assets and personal assets. But if you do have, if you're using some sort of an EDR solution, talk to your vendor, see if you can get free stuff. I know there's a company called Color Tokens. They're giving away free stuff. Cylance may have some free EDR solutions. Really get creative and don't be afraid to ask. There's so many people willing to help during COVID-19 that you're almost over inundated with people trying to be helpful. So I'm gonna take a quick pause there and jump into, take a look back in the chat, see if there's any more questions. Oh, so we'll keep moving forward here.
So John, there was a question that came. John, there is a question that did come in.
Yeah.
User says, what does SIM stand for?
Okay, that is Security Information Event Management. It's typically, a lot of times, it's synonymous to people as log aggregation, but those are really two separate things. When we come to log management, we want to have logs generated on every endpoint according to a rational audit policy. And the NSA has a great primer. It's called NSA Spotting the Adversary. And they're going to be able to help you understand the types of events you should be collecting. Once all those logs are generated from these various endpoints, they get collected or aggregated someplace. And that's great to have them in a central location, but they need more work done to them. And that's where the role of SIM comes into place. So SIM, a lot of times a log aggregator will enrich that data for you. It will filter the data. It normalizes the data. And then it sends it into backend storage, where inside of backend storage, it gets indexed and it's made available for rapid searching. So there's tools out there like Splunk, Elasticstack, Rapid7 has a solution, Alien Vault by AT&T, Exabeam, Fortinet has their FortiSIM product. There's a number of SIMs out there. So it's very, very powerful capabilities. And when you look at Elasticsearch, it's even free. So the technology is there at an affordable price. Typically, it's staff training and effective processes that get in the way of a successful SIM implementation. And on another SIM note, I advocate to find a use case that you feel is most valuable to you, and I tend to favor end user data, and run it through from cradle to grave. Collect it, enrich it, send it to the backend storage, build your dashboards, build your alerts, build your visualizations, and then move on to the next use case. I've seen a lot of companies develop a laundry list of use cases and take months, sometimes more than a year, to get to a full SIM implementation, whereas there's really some quick wins that you can get with a SIM. All right, so the home network. We talk about, are you using a personal computer, a laptop, a workstation that you took from the office, VPN, LogMeIn, RDP, no matter what we're doing in those various areas, we all collapse to the same common ground. Our users are sitting inside of their home on an untrusted network. We're allowing sensitive corporate secrets to fly around on hundreds, maybe even thousands of untrusted home networks, depending on how big your company is. And there's a laundry list of questions that we have to ask ourselves, but now we're not really asking ourselves. We have to get our users involved, and this is where it kind of gets scary. We're relying on our users, and we need to ask them, did you change the default password to the router from a management perspective? Do you allow remote management of the router from the internet? Because typically it's enabled by default. Have you turned on encryption to protect the wireless network? It usually isn't turned on by default, so better question is, did your kids turn it off? If it is protected by a password, is it strong? Have holes already been punched through the router? Are weak services running on the router? Have your kids already handed out the password to all their friends? What about firmware updates? Has the router already been hacked? So there's really a lot to think about. This is very difficult. And if you look at this slide, you can also see a home network is not just a couple computers anymore. Smart 83% of routers contain some sort of vulnerable code, which is really where we point to that second bullet. Users have to keep the firmware up to date. And you're all going to have a various confidence level about your end users sitting at home. What are they really doing? Do they keep their firmware up to date? Or do they have a long, difficult to guess password with WPA? Have they disabled some of these services that you don't want turned on? Universal plug and play, WPS? Do they allow remote management from the internet? And in a perfect world, they're going to take all non-work devices. Because let's face it, we're at home. We have spouses who are working. We're working. I mean, in my house, I've got a couple spring breakers who never went back to work. So they're doing online college courses from home. There's all sorts of devices. Try to get those non-essentials into a guest network. Not only will it provide you with a lift in security, you might be able to do some traffic shaping to give your authority over the kids' PlayStations and Xboxes. Also, OpenDNS and Quad9, they're DNS providers that can provide you with a boost in security at the DNS layer. These are free. And the IP addresses for OpenDNS or Quad9 are going to be in the references that are shared with you after the, you're going to get those via email. Now, this is pretty easy. You could send out something to your users and say, go to the following URL, which once again, that URL is included in the references, and they can check their router. And in this case, no issues were found, so that user can just report back to your security team. Hey, no problems were found with my router. In the event problems are found, they can look at those detailed results, send you a screenshot of the router, different confidence level and their ability to manage and configure the router that sits in their home network. I'm interested in knowing what your confidence level is. Once again, these are all anonymous answers, so we're not going to know what you put. My personal answer was D. Yeah, and it does look like the stream died. Oh, did it come back? I think it came back. Leslie, if you could close the polls. All right. Okay. So I'm happy for the 33% of you who think that you have high confidence in your staff. Low confidence, 66. That's what I would have expected. So listen, this is going to be high touch. It's going to be one-on-one screen share sessions with your staff to step through and make these changes. So if we, this may persist. We think about whether there could be a rebound, whether there could be an outbreak in the winter. We just don't know. So as you think about sustained remote operations, you may be worth your while to engage in those one-on-one sessions. It's really something for all of you to consider on your own. It's hard to know. This does end the slides for the presentation. I thank you for being here. I thank you for your patience. I know that sometimes the audio has been in and out, some of the video has been in and out. There's just tremendous demand for bandwidth across the internet. I certainly do appreciate all the good questions and information in the chat windows. I'm going to go one last time to see, and Umesh and Leslie, if you could see, is there anything in chat that's unanswered? Simless. Okay, somebody asked, what about Simless? I was told by Alert Logic that it was better because not one has time to scour through the logs. I think that Simless may largely be a marketing term, and I wouldn't get caught up on that term. I would really focus on the end results. Do they have the ability to take in data, enrich it properly, correlate it, and send you valuable alerts that help you to orient response activities to anomalous activities? That's really what you want to do. The technology that they're going to use behind the scenes, in my opinion, is irrelevant. They own it, they operate it, they're kind of an MSSP in this instance, and I think it largely speaks to some of the continuous development, continuation efforts that they're doing right now in AWS, and a lot of function as a service to try and speed up the processing. So I know their new product is developed with more modern programming methodologies and more modern pipelines, but once again, I wouldn't get caught up about the marketing terms. Think about the end result. What does it really provide you? Do I notice that bank auditors, examiners are starting to ask for data logs we provide? So personally, I have not seen a strong demand signal from auditors or examiners for the actual logs. Now, I do have them available if they should want them. So that SIM not only is going to provide you with enriched data and good alerts, it's also, those logs are stored. I store my logs for at least 13 months. I can go in and manually write a query to satisfy any demand from an examiner or an auditor. So I think that we just have to get creative. There are some SIM solutions out there that are built specifically for financial services, and they advertise as helping you through the cybersecurity assessment tool. That's not a way that I've moved. And someone did put in the chat, thanks, Mikkel. Obviously, people can refer to NIST 171 for cyber framework and the monitoring of remote workstations. That's all I see in the chat window. Umesh, I'm going to turn this over to you to, oh, one last question. Who are you using for SIM? So I know security is not achieved through obscurity, but I don't really share who I use. I can tell you that we put a lot of due diligence into our selection, and right now, in my opinion, some of the best capabilities you're going to get is from the ELK stack. Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana dashboards, and WinLogBeats as a collection agent. But if you don't have the ability to perform that level of elbow grease, then you're going to want to find somebody to build that, host it, and manage it for you. A company like H&A Security Solutions is a good bet. Justin Henderson actually authored Security 555 for the SANS Institute, and he sells an Elastic Stack. So I'm not associated with him. I don't get any money for this. I just know that he is absolutely fantastic with everything that he does. What questions should we be asking of vendors who are providing online collaboration tools to ensure our data is safe? That's a great question. I think the word data is where we really need to focus. Is the data encrypted? Is the data encrypted end-to-end? How is it encrypted end-to-end? And do they ever have the ability to see that real data? Do they store the data? Do they take any attributes of metadata and sell it to resellers? I would also be researching any open CVEs, right? The common vulnerabilities and exposures about that product to see if there's any open vulnerabilities which are exploitable. I don't allow Zoom at the bank, it's blocked because of the problems that they're having right now. Other types of questions I would ask collaboration vendors is for best practices guides, or even ProServe, professional services in the deployment of it. So someone asked if the Zoom security session settings are good enough, or should we use another platform? You know, it all boils down to risk acceptance and risk tolerance. Not everybody has the same amount of risk tolerance. I think that you should, when you get the resources and you can see the IANS research security checklist for Zoom, for Teams, for GoToMeeting, for all of them, take a look at it and think, is this reasonable? So Zoom actually on their page, Zoom has some pages on their website as well that talk about best practices. Make sure there's a meeting password for every meeting. Hold everybody in a meeting room prior to it kicking off. Don't allow people into the meeting after it does kick off. Make sure you're looking at all the attendees to make so that you can recognize them, and only allow invited guests into the session as opposed to random people. Those are all really good things. Now, I would also say, be careful of your surroundings. You know, if you don't want your children's pictures to be shown on your webcam, then don't have them behind you. You know, you'll notice there's nothing really, well, you can't see me right now, but there's nothing behind me that is sensitive. Some people, you can actually see the books that they're reading on their bookshelf and get an idea, oh, wow, look, there's all this checkpoint firewall books. Well, now I know they have a firewall, a checkpoint firewall, and I can now start looking for common vulnerabilities and exposures for checkpoint, and I've got potential open source intelligence gathering against that person. So that's something to always consider. And it looks like we do. Matt asked a question about VPN service providers, and I'm going to scroll up because I didn't see it. I think Dave asked. But okay, so VPN service providers, if you were to, I'm assuming this is for home use, you know, you're sitting at your home, you want your traffic to be protected by a VPN so you can shield your traffic from your ISP. That's kind of the bent I'm going on based on that question. And I know that, well, I don't want to be in the game of providing a specific recommendation on manufacturers and services and products, but NordVPN has a really good track record of providing security and performance. So if you were to look at NordVPN and maybe look at some of their counterparts and their competitors, you'll get an idea and it'll kind of narrow the scope. And one of the big testaments to NordVPN is gamers. Gamers quite frequently use it, and they are really, really interested in performance. Don't get me wrong, if you do some research, you're going to see that NordVPN, along with a few other VPN service providers, they actually did get hacked in and of themselves, and they had some issues, but that didn't hit the VPN service side of the house. And that's Nord, that's N-O-R-D as in Delta VPN, November, Oscar, Romeo, Delta. And it looks like, all right, we had a Zoom bomb on a call. So, you know, I'm pretty sure, you know, I haven't tested this. So all we can really do is go on what we're being told. A lot of what I do and what I talk about, I've tested. I have not personally tested the ability to Zoom bomb somebody in the absence of an invitation. So it's still happening, and I know people are putting up some offensive content during these sessions. So we got just a few more minutes left. Seems like if someone has a question that you asked, it's scrolled earlier in the chat. I didn't see it. If you have any open questions, just throw it into the chat window to refresh it. Otherwise, I'm going to hand this over to Umesh for a wrap up. And thanks everybody for being here. I hope that this was useful to you and you can take something back to the office, back to your home, protect yourself, your loved ones, and your business. Umesh, over to you.
Well, excellent, John, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Really, I'm going to just take this opportunity to make a very shameless plug for Blue Lens. Actually, you know, with SIM Solutions, there was a lot of conversation around SIM Solutions. And SIM Solutions capture a lot of information. They scrape event logs. There's a lot of duplicity, a lot of noise, a lot of redundancy. And sometimes there are missing GUIDs, missing events. So our product, actually, LT Auditor Plus, filters out and provides intelligence and creates a clean, crisp record, and then pipes the data into its own database or into SIM solutions such as Splunk and Elasticsearch. And also it serves up syslog server events. So what you can do is actually reduce the quantity and improve the quality of information going into something like Splunk. And we've been known to kind of reduce the cost of data ingestion and data storage in Splunk by a factor of anywhere from 5 to 1 to 10 to 1. So that adds up because most of these SIM solutions all price on data ingestion and data storage. So that's one thing. The other thing I would bring to everybody's attention is that on the cyberhouston.org website, we have resources. We have some guidance for board of directors. All of these resources on the Cyber Houston website are free, and they are resources to our community. So we have guidance for the board of directors. We have a business vitality guide that's being updated. We have a cyber preparedness online assessment tool where people can go in, managers and CEOs, the C-suite can go in and take a self-assessment of their organization, begin to understand the types of questions. There are like 9 categories and 68 questions that need to be really thought through. And then there's also a free cyber scan that helps you with the basic blocking and tackling that people should be able to do on the Active Directory networks. But a lot of times, small and medium-sized businesses don't have the resources. They don't have the IT. They have IT skills, but they don't necessarily have cybersecurity skills. And their IT folks are pretty much working in overload, in a break-fix mode, keeping things up and running. So things do slip. So that free cyber scan is a great little tool, goes through 25 different items and gives you a very simple scan and a report that can help you remediate where your vulnerabilities and security settings on Active Directory might be weak, as well as it helps you provide a report to your board of directors or your CEO. So with those are some tools that I wanted to bring, and they're free tools. Everything is done through a lens of volunteerism. And with that, I want to thank you, Jon, for your time. And to all our viewers, I want to say a big thank you for being part of our inaugural session. We are going to get better. This was the first time. I'm sure there was some voice issues, some video issues. We were not as clean as we could have been, but we will get better. This presentation will be posted to the Cyber Houston YouTube channel and to the cyberhouston.org website. Again, a very special thank you to our sponsors at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Grenada Digital, University of Houston downtown. And our goal at Cyber Houston is to continuously educate and inform our business leaders on how to manage cybersecurity risk, manage and govern that. And so to do that, we take the lessons learned from the enterprise and try to distill that down into, so we use experts like Jon and others to distill that down into sensible and economical, reasonable recommendations and guidance to small and medium-sized businesses so that we can help them and our region improve their cyber posture, improve their resilience, and therefore become better, stronger partners back to the enterprise. Next week, same day, same time. So next Wednesday, 11:30 to 12:30 will be our next live stream. And we have Dr. Phil Beckett, CEO of HASA, Health Access San Antonio, and he will be talking about how COVID-19 has affected and changed the whole landscape around security and privacy around electronic health records. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining. Please stay healthy, please stay safe, and we will see you at our next session on the Cybersecurity Mastermind Series, 11:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m. next Wednesday. Be safe, everybody. Take care.